The call came on a Tuesday morning, about 3 months after I left Redstone. I was at my desk at Vanguard going through a supplier quote for a client in Youngstown when my cell buzzed. Walt Greer, procurement manager at Hartley Industrial Supply. We'd worked together for 4 years. I picked up. "Hank," he said, "you guys handle mill-grade hydraulic fittings over there." "We do," I said. "What size run are you looking at?" He gave me the specs. I wrote them down. We talked pricing for about 10 minutes, same as we always had. Before he hung up, he said, "I'll be honest with you. We went a different direction on the Redstone renewal." I didn't say anything. 3 missed deadlines on the pricing side, he added. "In 1 quarter, I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "And I meant it. Don't be," Walt said. Then he was gone. I set the phone down and looked out the window at the Vanguard yard. Trucks moving. A forklift unloading a flatbed near the east gate. Business running like it was supposed to. That phone call was the moment I understood how it all shook out. But to explain what it meant, I have to go back to the meeting that started everything. My name is Hank Decker. I'm 54 years old. For 6 years, I managed the key accounts that kept Redstone Equipment Solutions running in western Pennsylvania. Steel mills, fabrication plants, industrial suppliers all across the Rust Belt. My territory ran about $42 million in annual contracts. Hartley Industrial was the biggest at $11 million a year. Copeland Fabrication was next. Then border states, a handful of mid-size operations, and about a dozen smaller accounts I'd built from scratch. I knew every procurement manager by name. I knew which ones wanted a phone call and which ones wanted an email. I knew which plants ran skeleton crews on Fridays and which ones would have a supervisor on the floor at 6 a.m. on a Saturday if a shipment came in wrong. That knowledge takes years to build. You can't download it. You can't put it in an onboarding document. Redstone CEO Neil Pruitt knew that. He'd told me directly, about 2 weeks before the meeting, that the regional sales director role was mine, not officially, not in writing. Just the 2 of us after a client call. "The board knows who's been carrying this region," he said. "It's going to be you, Hank." I didn't ask for it in writing. Looking back, maybe I should have. The morning of the promotion meeting, I drove in early. The conference room looked out over the loading yard. Neil sat at the head of the table. Nadine Holloway from HR sat beside him, folder open. The numbers on the agenda were my numbers. 6 years of my work sitting in a printed report on that table. Neil started going through the region's performance. $11 million with Hartley, the Copeland renewal. Border states contracts running through Q3. He nodded as he read, like he was proud of it. I waited. Then the door opened. No knock. Gloria Pruitt walked in, Neil's wife. She had no official role at Redstone, no title, no seat on the board. But she was in that room like she owned it, because in every way that actually mattered, she did. Neil's shoulders went stiff. Nadine set her pen down. Gloria didn't sit. She looked at Neil and said it flat. The board already signed off. That position is going to Iris. Nobody spoke. Behind Gloria stood Iris Pruitt. Their daughter, 26 years old, MBA from a good school, 0 field experience. She gave a small nod, not arrogant, exactly, just certain. The way people look when they've been told their whole life that the room was going to adjust around them. Gloria added, almost as an afterthought, "We're calling it a transitional leadership role. Good opportunity for fresh perspective. Transitional, that was the framing, a word chosen to make a family decision sound like a business strategy." I looked at Neil. He was looking at the table. Nadine glanced at me once. Quick, she understood exactly what had just happened. 6 years of regional growth, the strongest numbers in company history, and the decision had been made before any of us walked into that room. I thought about pushing back. Part of me wanted to, but I looked around and saw clearly that nobody in that room was waiting to hear my side. So I nodded once. Looked at Iris, said congratulations. She smiled like the outcome had always been obvious. Neil looked relieved that there wasn't a scene. Nadine stopped writing. I picked up my notebook, stood up, and walked out. By the time I reached my desk, one thing was clear. Redstone had made their decision. Now I needed to make mine. The next morning was a regular morning, phones, sales reports, the dock humming outside. I showed up at 7:30, answered emails, caught a pricing error a junior rep had sent to a supplier in Allentown, fixed it before it became a problem. Word travels fast in a company like Redstone. By lunch, 3 coworkers had come by my desk. "You doing all right?" one asked quietly. "Fine," I said. 2 days later, my phone rang. Leon Varga, VP of Operations at Vanguard Supply Group. Regional competitor, smaller than Redstone, but growing fast. "We've been watching your territory for 2 years, Leon said. "We've been watching who actually runs it." He got to the point quickly. "Director of Operations. My own team, my own approach to the region." I told him I'd think about it. I also did one more thing that week. I spent an hour with a labor attorney, not to file anything, just to understand exactly what my contract said. 30-day notice requirement, standard terms, clean. Then I sent a written request to Neil asking for documentation of the promotion decision and the reasoning behind it. Neil responded with 2 vague sentences. Nadine sent a form letter. I saved both emails. I kept coming to work, kept doing the job exactly the same way, but I knew what I was going to do. A month after that meeting, I walked into Neil's office with a white envelope. He looked up surprised. "Hank, come in." Nadine Holloway was already sitting at the small conference table beside his desk. HR always seemed to appear when paperwork was involved. I stepped inside, closed the door, and set the envelope on the desk. Slid it toward him. He opened it. Read the first line. By the time he reached the bottom of the page, his face had changed. "Is this serious?" "Yes. This is a resignation. 30 days notice, per the contract." Nadine folded her hands on the table. From an HR standpoint, Hank is fully within his contractual obligations. Neil leaned back in his chair. He wasn't a stupid man. He understood immediately what was sitting in front of him. I wasn't just another manager walking out. The accounts I handled were the backbone of Redstone's regional operation. Hartley Industrial, Copeland Fabrication, border states, 6 years of negotiations, emergency calls, vendor relationships built one conversation at a time. He exhaled. "This creates a serious operational problem." Nadine didn't disagree. Then Neil said something that explained more about Redstone than anything else I'd witnessed. "We need to bring Gloria in on this." He was already reaching for the phone before I could respond. 10 minutes later, the door opened. Gloria walked in the same way she always did. No knock, no pause. Iris followed a step behind and leaned against the back wall like this was a minor inconvenience to her afternoon. Gloria looked at the letter on Neil's desk. Then at me. "You're resigning." "Yes. You'll stay 60 days. They need time to transition the accounts. My contract requires 30. She didn't blink. 30 days is not enough. Nadine spoke carefully. "Gloria, his employment agreement specifies a 30-day notice period. He is fully compliant with those terms." Gloria turned toward her slowly. The room went quiet. Neil stared at the table. He said nothing. That told everyone in the room exactly who was running the company. Gloria looked back at me. "You manage over $40 million in accounts. You expect us to replace that in 30 days. That depends on how prepared the new director is." I said. Iris shifted slightly against the wall. Gloria's voice went flat. "Those relationships belong to this company." I kept my voice even. "The contracts belong to the company. The relationships belong to the people who built them." Neil's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely lost. Like the thing he'd been avoiding thinking about had just landed in front of him and he had no way around it. But Gloria had already decided how the room ended. "Then you can leave in 30 days. Cold final." She picked up the letter, set it back down, and walked out. Iris followed without a word. I pushed back from the table, stood up, looked at Iris before I reached the door. "You should call Walt over at Hartley soon," I said. "In 30 days, he's going to start asking for you." She nodded like she already had a plan. The 30 days were quiet, no confrontations, no drama. I showed up at the same time every morning, did the work the same way I always had. I also sent personal emails to every client I'd worked with over those 6 years. No forwarding address, no pitch. Just, "It's been a privilege working with your team. Thank you for 6 years of trust." Every word of it above board. I checked with the attorney. The responses came back fast, warmer than I expected. Iris started making her rounds with the major accounts during my second week of notice. One afternoon, she stopped by my desk and asked how I usually handled a delivery dispute with a particular regional supplier. I walked her through the standard process. Everything in the handbook, nothing more. That was the job I still had. She nodded, wrote something down, and left. I don't think she understood yet what she didn't know. A few days later, a client I'd worked with for 3 years called me directly after his first call with Iris. He didn't say anything negative. He just asked, "Are you still on the account for a few more weeks?" "I am," I told him. "Good," he said. Then a pause. "Hank, when you land somewhere, let me know." I thanked him and moved on. The last real moment I remember from those 30 days happened in the 3rd week. Iris had scheduled a call with Hartley Industrial, their first direct conversation. Walt called me the same afternoon. "She seemed organized," he said carefully. "Good," I said. "She had a slide deck." I didn't respond to that. "Hank," Walt said after a moment, "who built the Hartley account?" "It was a team effort," I said. Walt laughed, short and quiet. "Sure it was." He thanked me and hung up. That was the last time we spoke before I left Redstone. On my last Friday, I packed up my desk. A coffee mug, a notepad, a small calendar I'd had for 3 years. Not much to show for 6 years, but I'd never been someone who decorated an office. I walked past Neil's door on the way out. He was at his desk staring at his monitor. He saw me, gave a slow nod. I nodded back and kept walking. Vanguard was a smaller operation, but it ran clean. Leon had built a team that knew how to work without a lot of overhead. My first week, he dropped a stack of regional data on my desk and said, "Tell me what you see." No welcome speech, no orientation tour, just the work. That suited me fine. I spent the first month learning the Vanguard side of the territory. Different supplier relationships, different pricing structures, but the same basic landscape I'd spent 6 years working. I knew the mills, the fabricators, the procurement managers who actually made the buying decisions. I knew what they needed before they asked for it. Leon stopped by my office at the end of my 3rd week and asked how I was settling in. "Good," I said. "Any names on your radar?" "A few," I said. "Give it some time." He nodded and left it there. That was one of the things I appreciated about Vanguard. Nobody pushed. They hired people they trusted and then let them work. What happened next at Redstone, I didn't find out all at once. It came in pieces, the way news usually travels in this industry. A comment here, a phone call there, bit by bit, the picture filled in. The first thing I heard was about Hartley. Walt called me about 3 months after I left Redstone. That was the call I described at the start. He needed hydraulic fittings, quoted. We handled the business. Then before he hung up, he mentioned the Redstone renewal, the 3 missed pricing deadlines, the decision Hartley had already made. I told him I was sorry to hear it. "Don't be," he said. After that call, I sat for a minute and thought about Iris. She wasn't a bad person. She was 26, had a graduate degree, and had been handed a territory she'd never worked a day in. She walked into accounts where the relationships had been built over years, with people who already had a vendor they trusted, and she showed up with a slide deck and a title. That's not a recipe for success. That's a setup, but it wasn't my call to make. It never was. The Copeland fabrication news came through a different channel. A supplier contact I'd known for a few years mentioned it in passing during a call about something else. Copeland had cut their projected order volume by about 35% heading into their next renewal discussion. They hadn't walked yet, but they were pulling back. In industrial supply, that's usually the first step before a full exit. Border states started redirecting a handful of emergency orders to another distributor. Not the whole account, just the urgent stuff. But in this business, when a client stops trusting you with their emergencies, the rest of the relationship follows slowly behind. Leon heard some of it through his own network. One afternoon, he stopped in my doorway and said, "Sounds like your old territory is having a rough quarter." Sounds like, I said. He didn't push further. Leon wasn't the type. By month 5, several of Redstone's major contracts had either been lost, reduced, or were flagged as at risk heading into renewal cycles. It wasn't that everything collapsed overnight. It was that multiple accounts hit their renewal windows at the same time, and Iris didn't have the relationships to hold them. The total exposure across those contracts added up to most of the region's annual revenue, close to $42 million when you counted the accounts that had already moved and the ones that were leaning toward the exit. The board started asking questions. From what I pieced together later, one of the independent board members requested an internal audit after looking at the Q3 revenue numbers. The numbers didn't match the projections Neil had given the board earlier in the year. When they started pulling on that thread, they found other things. They reviewed internal communications going back to the month before the promotion meeting. What they found was a chain of emails between Gloria and 3 board members. She had contacted them individually before the vote, not in an official board session, framing Iris as the right candidate and the transition as already decided. One of the board members had forwarded those emails to the audit committee without telling anyone. That was the violation. Redstone's governance policy was clear about board members being lobbied outside of official sessions. Gloria had no formal role in the company. She had no standing to contact board members about personnel decisions. The fact that she'd done it through company email made it easy to document. Neil was called into a closed-door session with 3 directors. I heard the outline of that meeting from someone who was in the building that day. The directors had the audit report, the email chain, and the revenue numbers. They laid it all out in front of Neil and let the numbers do the talking. Neil didn't fight it. He resigned as CEO within the week. Iris stepped down from the regional director role shortly after. I don't think she had much choice. She hadn't caused the problem intentionally, but she had been placed in a role she wasn't ready for, and the results were in the reports. Gloria was removed from any advisory involvement with the company. No formal title, no access to board communications, no attendance at leadership meetings. The board made it clear that what had happened was a governance failure, and they weren't interested in letting the conditions that caused it continue. Redstone brought in outside leadership to stabilize the region. I heard they hired a search firm to find a new CEO. Whether they found the right person, I can't say. That was their problem to solve. About 2 weeks after Neil's resignation, my cell rang. Number I didn't recognize at first. I picked up. It was a man named Gary Lennox. He introduced himself as the interim CEO the board had appointed while the search was underway. Mr. Decker, he said, I'll get straight to the point. We're in the middle of a difficult transition and we have some client relationships that need attention. We'd like to discuss whether you'd be open to consulting for us on a short-term basis. I listened to the whole thing. He was professional about it. Laid out what they were looking for, the timeline, what they thought they needed. When he finished, I said I appreciate the call, Gary. I genuinely wish Redstone well. Then I told him I wasn't available, thanked him for reaching out, and hung up. Leon was walking past my office when I set the phone down. He looked at my face. Everything okay? Fine, I said. Just some old business. He nodded and kept walking. I turned back to the quote I'd been working on before the call. A new client in Youngstown, mid-size fabrication shop, looking to consolidate their parts suppliers. Good account if we handled it right. The kind of relationship that takes a year to build and lasts a decade if you do the work. I pulled up their specs and got back to it. That Youngstown account came together over the next few months. Slow at first, the way good accounts usually go. A few calls, a site visit, some back and forth on pricing and delivery windows. By the time we signed the agreement, it felt solid, the kind of account you can build on. Leon stopped by my office one morning about 6 months into my time at Vanguard. He had a trade report in his hand, set it on my desk without saying anything. I looked at the headline, Redstone Equipment Solutions, Southwest Pennsylvania region. Revenue down sharply year over year. Contracts lost or under review. The article mentioned leadership changes and a difficult transition period. Leon leaned against the doorframe. You see this? Just now, I said. He watched me for a second. How do you feel about it? I thought about that. The honest answer was that I didn't feel much. Not satisfaction, not relief. More like when you solve a math problem you already knew the answer to. The numbers came out the way the numbers were going to come out. It's a shame, I said. They built something real over there. It takes a long time to build something real. Leon nodded. You ever think about what would have happened if you'd stayed? Sometimes, I said. I would have spent the next 2 years watching the accounts walk out one at a time, trying to hold things together while someone else made the calls. And in the end, the result would have been the same, except I'd have been stuck in the middle of it. Leon picked the report back up. Some companies think the relationships live in the CRM system, he said. I know, I said they find out the hard way. He left and I went back to work. A few weeks after that, Walt called again. Routine business, a parts order, the usual back and forth. Before he hung up, he said, We're expanding the Youngstown facility next year. Going to need a reliable supplier on the equipment side. Talk to me when you're ready, I said. Already I am, he said. That was how it worked, not dramatic. Not a big moment, just a phone call about parts that turned into something bigger because the trust was already there. I've been at Vanguard 2 years now. The Western PA territory we run is smaller than what Redstone had in its prime, but it's growing clean. Good clients, solid supplier relationships, a team that knows how to handle a problem without waiting to be told what to do. I don't talk about Redstone much. People in the industry know what happened. They've drawn their own conclusions. What I do think about sometimes is that morning in the conference room. Neil at the head of the table, Nadine with her folder, the door opening without a knock, and Gloria walking in like the decision had already been made because it had. The thing is, I don't blame Iris. She was handed something she wasn't ready for and nobody told her the real cost of that. She'll figure it out eventually, find her footing somewhere, build her own track record. That's how it's supposed to work. I don't even blame Neil, not entirely. He made a choice to keep peace in his house and it cost him his company. That's a trade he made and he'll live with it. Most men in his position would have done the same. What I think about is the moment I walked out of that building on my last Friday. The parking lot was quiet. A light rain coming down. I sat in my truck for a minute before I started it. I wasn't angry. That's the part people don't expect when I tell this story. I was just clear about what the job had been worth and what it hadn't. Clear about where I was going. Clear that 6 years of work doesn't disappear because someone puts a different name on the office door. That clarity was worth more than any promotion they could have given me. I started the truck and drove to my new job. If you've spent years doing good work and watched someone else get handed what you earned, you know exactly how that conference room felt. And if you've ever wondered whether staying quiet and doing the right thing actually matters in the end, I hope this answers it. It doesn't always work out fast. It doesn't always look like justice when it happens, but the work you put in and the trust you build don't belong to the company that signed your paycheck. They belong to you. They go where you go. Do the work, know your worth, and when the room stops being worth your time, know when to stand up and walk out of it. That's the whole thing right there.